Kelsey.
I'm Shay McGalley.
And I'm David Keener.
And this is the Hourlings podcast project. Tonight we're talking about a topic close to my heart, and that's food. It's really interesting how often I've gotten really good feedback in my novels about the food that I talk about in there. I have found that food is really important in stories because everybody eats. In a story where nobody ever eats, I kind of notice it. And even what they eat becomes important to the plot because, you know, it develops characters, you know, and stuff like that. So what do you guys think? Do you guys include food in your writing?
Yeah, I definitely do, especially in my fantasy writing. It's a great way to world build, to, you know, even if you don't exactly explain what something is, if you just say, I don't know, like Oompa wine, you know, like that's obviously something different. It's a great way, it's a fun way to integrate things. What do you think, Dave?
Well, you know, when this topic first came up, I'm like, oh, I guess I want to be the one in this one that doesn't really use food in his stories. And then I got to thinking about it, and I'm like, I came up with, you know, like 3 occasions where food was used in my stories to make an important point about the characters. And so, you know, there's different ways to use food in a story.
Yeah, I like, first and foremost, food to develop character. You know, I have had so many protagonists that love coffee, and I think it's because I have so many readers that love coffee. They just love coffee. And I've seen it in TV shows as well. You know, you watch The Expanse, they need their coffee bad. And, you know, and other shows like that. But in my writing,
Not a coffee guy.
Coke Zero.
I'll never be a coffee guy. I'm sorry.
Well, even something like the kind of drinks you drink, what you call them can convey where you are in the country. If you call it soda, or if you call it a Coke, or if you pop, very, you know, and you can use that kind of thing to differentiate characters in stories.
Yeah, I think you know, J.K. Rowling used food with Dumbledore actually to lighten up, you know, his very serious power, whatever you look at him as, that patriarch, whatever it is. But you know, made him kind of cute and childlike with, you know, his love of gumdrops, or his love, you know. So it is a very good way.
Every flavor beans.
There you go. Yes.
There you go.
Yeah,
except for the earwax one.
Not so good. Yeah.
Not so much.
I was very blessed to have been a guest on all the sets of the Hunger Games movies, which were, you know, a dystopian sci-fi setting. And I met a gentleman on the set where his sole job in Hollywood is to create food. So he showed me these plates and these platters of sci-fi looking food, which, you know, everything is like on sticks, you know, they're like weird meat products twisting around, all this weird stuff. And, you know, he puts a shine on it like they do in commercials to make it look really delicious. It's not actually human edible. But actually, this is funny. It's not human grade to eat, but it is actually food. His food anyway was. I'm sure there's some plastic foods on sets, but his food was real. And so over the days that I was a guest on the set, they would use the same food because it took him hours and hours to make it look the way it looked. And it smelled terrible after like the second or third day because they couldn't remake it. It cost too much. So there you go.
Well, writing books, you don't have that problem.
That's right.
I think that's what you call a niche job too.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting in my novels, you know, I had my protagonist, he was, you know, in a challenge to survive. And it's interesting, ultimately, the way the book rolled, I show a lot of cooking and a lot of meals and a lot of like medieval technology, how to cook in a fireplace, how to use a cauldron to cook, and all this other kind of stuff. And it's really funny. I've on many occasions gotten requests from readers saying, "When are you going to do a cookbook? Your stories made me so hungry. I want that."
Nice.
And, I've always wanted to do that, but I was hoping that my wife would take that up.
I have a question for you guys. What do you think about authors who neglect like eating and rationing for their characters on the quest, like on their big journey? Like somehow they're just like crossing mountains without, like how, first of all, you can't carry that much food for a several week journey, and they don't show them hunting or anything like that. What do you think about that? Do you think it's lazy, or do you think it's one of those things?
It's very lazy. I think that's really lazy.
So they should always show it?
Well, I think that you need to convey that they have a pack mule with them. Now, Lord of the Rings had Bill the donkey that was carrying their provisions until they lost it. They talk about hunting a little bit, and weird thing is hunting's really hard.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of hunting, particularly bow hunting, really hard. Fishing's a little bit easier if you know how to do it, but just coming up with food on the fly while you're trying to quest.
There's also
not that
foraging.
easy.
There's also foraging. If you have knowledge of the local environment and the plants and stuff that are good, you can perhaps forage on your journey depending on the time of year and such.
Yep. And
I don't think
just having with you the accoutrements to cook, even to boil water to drink. It's more than you think. To have pots and pans, to bring along and stuff. It's interesting.
But I don't think you have to show everything, though.
Yeah.
You have to convince me that they are carrying some extra food along, especially the kind of stuff that will last a long time. You have to convince me that they have some plans for hunting and foraging along the way, and then skip ahead, and when they arrive, tell me that they're a lot thinner and a lot more tired, and I'm pretty much there. I believe you. But if you just gloss over the details, it feels like magic, not travel.
Yeah.
Back to my first comment about how you can very subtly incorporate fantasy world building in different types of food. Another example I want to bring up that our listeners can think about is like, instead of just having ale at the tavern, just naming it something like Whisperberry Ale. All of a sudden it's something unique. All of a sudden it enhances the immersion of your world. And I really just, sorry to bring it up twice, but I think it's worth bringing up twice. It's just a great way to do it.
Well,
yeah,
I've also used it, not so much with a special name, but for instance, I had a little orphan beggar girl in one of my stories, and somebody threw food scraps at her to get rid of her. Well, she ran away, and then she came back after the person who'd done it was gone, and she ate the food scraps and commented to herself that it was the best meal she'd had in a week, right? And that gave you an idea of what her life was like, right? I really used that to establish her condition.
Yeah.
That's interesting, Dave. I mean, that brings up the point of, this is kind of related to food, but hunger is certainly a driving factor for many plots. So there you go. Have you ever done that, Marty, in one of your sci-fis, like taken something that is common on our menu and added a twist to it?
Yeah. There's some things that are fundamental, even across cultures, and things like bread and beer and wine. They are pretty much universal. Roasted meat, you can pretty much get everywhere. Stew. Every culture has a kind of stew that is in fact the best way to not ruin animals if you are being very careful on the edge of starvation. I mean, it really cracks me up when you see a TV show, they're cooking a squirrel on a stick when what they ought to be doing is boiling it, because, you know, even the broth then still has a caloric content and stuff.
Have you ever heard of survivor stew?
Yeah.
So, well, it may be, we'll see what you think of it. One of my friends told me the story that when he was young, his family was really poor and they didn't always have food. So when they had leftovers, they put them in an ice cube tray, added water, and froze it. And then when there was a time when they couldn't buy food, they broke out some ice cubes and made stew, and that was what they lived off of. He called it survivor stew, and I was appalled. I had never, you know, middle-class child, I had never come across anybody who had been that poor that they couldn't afford food. It was a kind of a revelation to me.
Yeah.
Survivor stew. Was that the thing you were thinking, Marty?
That is not the reference that I had heard. It's interesting. I can remember, you know, when I was in college, and you know,
ramen noodles.
I wasn't eating on the regular either. Weekend jobs in the pizzeria though are damn handy.
Ramen noodles is the food of scholars.
Yeah, anything that you can buy in the bargain bin or for 10 for $1 will get you through.
7-Eleven lasagna.
Even, you know, even stories that take place in outer space. Food is in fact always a topic of consequence. Think of the story The Martian.
Right.
It was the fundamental axle in that entire story wheel, trying to figure out how to survive and get enough food, and later on the food that was problematic shifting inside the rocket that destroyed it and stuff. It was very interesting. And I used to do a lot of backpacking where we would take along with us, they make specific dehydrated foods where when you get to wherever you're going, as long as you have water, you can make actually a really ginormous pot of whatever it is that's dehydrated. And I used to really super enjoy that stuff.
The thing is, I've never done in my stories, like, you know, George R.R. Martin has done a lot of food in his stories, and he's even come out with a cookbook, you know, Game of Thrones cookbook. You know, you can't do that with my stories. I've used food, but I've never created or made in-world fancy foods with cool names that would, you know, make a cookbook. I've just used it for effect.
Hey, butterbeer is really good. You guys ever had butterbeer?
I have. I've actually been to that amusement park like 4 times now.
It's delicious.
No, I haven't.
Ooh, listen out.
Yeah, it's worth going. It's a lot of fun. Different
Bangers and mash. I use bangers and mash in the story.
Yeah, bangers and mash. Love it.
I mean, I guess that's the point. And to pivot away from fantasy foods, foods from other cultures are a good way to immerse your characters if it's set in, you know, this world. You know, if your character is going to be living in Latin America, you know, all the Latin American foods.
And I had introduced an American character who'd never been abroad. Sent him down in London and had his friend order him bangers and mash, which is UK type sausage, you know, soft sausage, baked under a layer of mashed potatoes. It's one of my favorite meals.
Yeah, it's great. I love that.
Making me hungry when I think about it.
I think it's interesting because, you know, anytime that I've really gone all out in describing food for some reason, whether it's fantasy food or if it's a dish that we're familiar with, and I just describe the taste and the smell and the texture and everything. Anytime I read that aloud at a writing group in any occasion, that's always been something where someone says, I like when you describe this, or this was a great description. I don't know, people just seem to respond very well to descriptions about food, so add them.
Yeah, people, you know, love chapters that include bacon.
Yeah, I mean, it's
universally.
Yeah,
I've also
Have
used,
trouble with your story? Sprinkle a little bacon in there.
There you go.
I've also used it to indicate growing camaraderie between characters.
Interesting.
In one story, they'd all survived a crash in the wilderness, and this was the first meal they'd had after managing to come together as survivors. And it wasn't great food, but it was a great meal because they were all alive and together. And there's something like that camaraderie, coming together as a team, that I wanted to capture. And food was the mechanism that allowed me to do that.
Food is also good for having some action between dialogue. So instead of just having two talking heads, have them sitting over a table, you know, clinking their utensils, taking a sip. It's a good in between action.
Yeah, that happens in my stories a lot. They'll, you know, two characters will meet over a meal, or even more characters, and you can differentiate personalities and really convey a lot about a person. One, by what they're eating, and then two, how they eat.
Yeah.
It's because a, you know, ravenous soldier is going to eat a lot differently than another character that, and it can be a lot of fun too.
And you avoid that, you know, monotonous back and forth of just dialogue. You can break it up so much easier when you have something on the table.
Somebody else I knew once had adopted a Russian child. And one of the things that he and his wife noticed about the child was when they served the child food, it didn't matter what it was. The child ate every bit of it and then came back for seconds. And then even the seconds disappeared. Well, it turns out there had been food issues at the orphanage where the child had been raised at. And so if you put food in front of him, he ate every single bit, no matter what it was. And then because he could get seconds, he was actually putting the food in his pockets and depositing it under his bed for later in case there wasn't food later. Right?
Yeah.
And that says something about a person right there. Wow, what kind of life was that kid living?
Yeah.
And you can really do development with characters, even if you're talking about, oh, when I was raised, you know, food was at a premium. You ate fast and as much as you could until there wasn't any left on the table. It's really interesting. And you can actually convey even a lot more nuances with food by what a specific character likes to eat or is not willing to eat. You know, you can really, you know, do some fun stuff with character development by having a hoity-toity, you know, character that, you know, won't eat this meal because, you know, there's flies in the room and flies probably, you know, stepped on it. And you can have a lot of fun with that.
And you can watch the person change over a story. Something that they might not eat at the beginning of the story is something they would eat wholeheartedly by the end, either because they've developed some new tastes, say the food of a foreign country, or because they've been in bad circumstances and, like that kid from the orphanage, you eat.
Learn better. Yeah.
Yeah. And a soldier, especially if they've been in a bunch of you know, combat situations and stuff, it's like you may eat when you can and sleep when you can, because you don't know when you're going to get your next meal or your next sleep period, and that says something about people too.
That's pretty fun. What else you guys got about food? I think it's great to include. It gives you more dimension in your stories. I like it when a character is eating Oreo cookies instead of, you know, generic cookie.
Yeah.
I think that just have fun with it, and it makes your stories more real.
Yeah, Marty, you're always saying that about brand names, right? Instead of saying shoes, say Nikes, right?
Yeah.
It adds some color. I think the last thing I'll say on food is that authors need to eat too. So value yourself, value your time and your writing, sell it for what it's worth, so you can eat, and make sure you have some really good snacks next to your table as you're writing. That's the last thing I'll say about food. Good topic.
What about you, Dave?
Let's see. I have a series I do on my website called Author Chow, where I talk about even writers have to eat. And so whenever I have a really good meal at a nice restaurant or a unique meal, I'll take a picture and then do a blog entry about it.
So what was your most recent favorite meal? I'll go first. Brenda and I this week, we went out to this place we've been wanting to go to here in Fredericksburg called simply The Pub. And, you know, it's exactly what you'd think it is. It's a classic pub on the inside, and they have pub food. And I had one of the best bacon cheeseburgers I've had since I can remember. Plus, the service was really good. So, high endorsement for the pub in Fredericksburg.
Nice.
Where you guys been lately and had that you really liked?
Well, for me, remember, it's been a pandemic and I kind of went into lockdown. So I haven't really been any place stupendous, but I will tell you about one of the best meals of my life. I took a tour of, my wife is Scottish, I took a tour of the Highlands. We've been driving for hours and we ended up at the top of Scotland at a fishing village called Ullapool. It was dusk, it was very nice, temperature out, the seagulls were flying around, and we got fish and chips from a shack on the shore. That fish was probably barely hours old before it got cooked. It is the best fish I've ever had in my life. And the seagulls were flapping around trying to get pieces and stuff. It was just a really cool experience. It was like we were super hungry. It was the quintessential like Scottish experience. It's hard to top.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about recently, but Marty, your example made me think of a really great pub that I went to. It was sort of a fancier pub, but it had like a little fireplace and, you know, the coat of arms on the wall, that kind of thing, out in Warrington. And I love white creamy soups, like, you know, mushroom soup or chowders of some kind. And they just had the most delicious mushroom soup that I had ever had. So there you go. That's one I'll throw at you.
Well, excellent. Well, folks out there, put food in your stories. Marty always likes it better when he reads about food.
Amen.
If I can't eat the food, at least I can read about it.
Amen. All right,
That's
guys.
it. Hey, that's good for this week. See you next one. Ciao.